how to describe his name, because I used to call him Rush and Rushmore. His signature in his email says Eric Christopher Rush, so I'll just say that. But Eric Rush is a decorated military veteran, media executive, and award-winning podcaster with a mission to inspire transformative thinking through authentic, purpose-driven storytelling. As the founder of Prime Pitch Podcast Network, Rush leverages his unique personal experiences with resilience, adversity, and growth to design, curate, and create high-impact podcast content that connects deeply with audiences.
Silence, all I know is prison walls became my deepest despair. Alone with me, I close of what I've done, and in that void I came undone. Until this silence rips me apart, but in the dark, he touched my heart. I was the captain of a sinking ship, lost in the storm I couldn't grip. When the sea rose up and dragged me under, I found grace in the crashing thunder. And the silence ripped me apart, but in the dark he touched my heart. I was the captain of a sinking ship, lost in the storm I couldn't grip. When the sea rose up and dragged me under, I found grace in the crushing thunder.
All right, what an impact. Oh, no problem. No, it's okay. You know, what an impactful scene when you watch the Titanic, you're watching the ship just dismantle, just disintegrate, just shatter, right? And when I was getting ready for this presentation, man, I got to look at this. I want to look at something and see if I can really resonate what it feels like to have people watching your life fall apart. Right? The people in the ship represent the people that try to help me along the way to save me, to intercede for God to try to rescue me. Of course, there were other people, innocent bystanders, that when my ship sank, I took down with me, right? And I watched those people on the boats, and I empathized with my mother and father because, you know, it's like witnessing something so tragic happen right before your eyes with their son, right? So today is more than just a speaking engagement. It's a milestone in my healing, my recovery, and my journey in faith. For years, I carried this story in silence. I should say, for decades, I carried this story in silence. Weighed down by shame, fear, and the belief that my past defined me. But today I stand before you, not just as a man not the man I used to be, but as someone who has found purpose in pain, purpose in strength, the strength in surrender, and hope in the wreckage. Sharing this testimony is one of the hardest and most important things I've ever done. And having you here means everything. Your presence is a reminder that none of us are meant to walk through life's storm alone. So from the bottom of my heart, I thank you. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being a part of this moment. I hope this message speaks to you in ways that you didn't expect it to. So, the other thing I did was say, well, what is the sinking ship? What is biblical about this sinking ship, right? You came up with this this concept of the sinking ship, and that really originated from a counselor that I was in a behavior modification program when I was incarcerated, and the counselor would, I used to run some of the stuff that was going on in prison, and he looked at me in the face, and it was a behavior modification program, and he's like, Rush. All these inmates, we were in a mediation where all these inmates were around us and we would confront each other about ridiculous behaviors, like who stole my soup, kind of thing. But he's like, Rush, you're the captain of a sinking ship. And at that time, I was like, of course, took me to a different place. I got angry and upset, right? But now as I reflect on it, I go, well, I'm here, everyone's dressed the same. We're all in white, we got a cough, we got a bent over cough, we got to take our, all that stuff is like, dude, I am in a sinking ship. Look at all these convicts around me, right? But today I'm using it as a tool and flipping the script on its head and confronting that counselor who actually said that to me at that time. And I'm going to use it today in an impactful way. How it connects to the Bible. Peter walked on water until fear took over. The moment he focused on the storm, instead of Jesus, he sank. But when he cried out, Jesus immediately pulled him up. Jonah ran from God's call and ended up in a storm. Throwing him into the sea, he sank, but God sent the great fish to save him. Paul warned of an upcoming storm, but no one listened. The ship was destroyed, and yet everyone survived just as God promised. For most of my life, I was the captain of a sinking ship. I had convinced myself that I could outmaneuver any storm, patch any cracks, and power through any wreckage. Because isn't that what captains do? Command, endure, lead. But here's the thing about storms. They don't care how strong and capable you think you are. What happens when the storm never ends? What happens when the waves never calm? What happens when the shore never appears? I didn't see it at the time, but my ship had been taking on water for years. Trauma, guilt, shame, addiction. At first, the leaks were small, almost unnoticeable. A childhood of survival fortified with stubbornness. War suffocated in silence. Prison, drowning in regret. But denial doesn't rescue you, and pretending doesn't keep the ship from sinking. And the cruelest revelation, the one I fought the hardest to ignore, I wasn't the captain keeping the ship afloat. One day, the storm swallowed me whole, and that's where I learned the most brutal, most paradoxical truth of my life. Sometimes you have to sink to the bottom of the ocean before you rise. But before we talk about rising, we need to talk about sinking. See, because no ship sinks overnight. I just didn't wake up one day shattered. My collapse began long before I realized what was happening to me. I didn't have a childhood. I had survival training. There was no space for childhood when every day was just a battle just to get through. My father left when I was 5. My mother was more or less still in a child herself. And there was no place for bedtime stories and gentle affection when the rent was due, the fridge was empty, and exhaustion was the only language spoken. I learned early that emotions were a liability, that softness invited suffering. And love, well, boy, love was a gamble I was destined to lose many times. By the time I turned 18, I thought I was unbreakable, a warrior, a man forged in conflict, chaos, and hardship. But I wasn't strong. I was hollow. I had no idea who I was. And that's why I enlisted. I wasn't just searching for structure. I was desperate for identity. And war? Well, war will give you that. It'll strip you down to the bone, reconstruct you into something sharp, something efficient, something that slots neatly into the machine. But what happens when the machine spits you back out? Here's a statistic that no one wants to talk about. Most combat veterans will say that the hardest part of war isn't what happens on the battlefield. It's coming home. Because the man who returns isn't the same one who left. You don't just come back with PTSD. You come back unrecognizable to yourself, to others. You return without a face, without a name, and worst of all, without a purpose. And when you have no identity, you will latch on to anything that makes you feel real again. And for some, it's violence. For others, it's a bottle. For me, it was both. And the worst part is I didn't even realize I was drowning until I tried to end my life. I survived, but surviving is not the same as living. And when existence becomes unbearable, you'll do anything to escape. I turned to substances, and at first they worked. They blurred the edges, quieted the noise, and made the world feel distant and small. But drowning doesn't feel like drowning at first. It feels like floating until you wake up one day and you realize that you're at the bottom. You're already at the bottom. Eventually, my substance use landed me in prison. And that's where I learned what real drowning feels like. Because what happens in prison because prison isn't just about bars and locked doors. It's about what happens to your mind. I was thrown into solitary confinement for 30 days. A room the size of a bathroom, no sound, no windows, no escape. At first, the silence sounded like nothing. But then, the nothing started to grow teeth. And then, the nothing starts to whisper. It whispers everything you're running from. The mistakes, the faces, the blood, the shame, regret, the nights you can't undo. And suddenly, you realize, now you're not trapped inside the cell. You're not trapped inside the cell. You're trapped inside yourself. Let me ask you something. If you were locked in a cell with your own thoughts, would you like the person you were left with? Because I didn't. And for the first time, I did something that I had never done before. On the walls of my personal prison, I wrote down the wounds of guilt, shame, regret, resentment, and I let go. Because sometimes when you let go of the wheel, that's when the real captain can take control. But solitary wasn't the only kind of prison I saw. Behind those walls, I saw men, 18, 19-year-old boys, really, facing life sentences. Not locked up, not just locked up, but locked away. Frozen in time, their worst moments tattooed to their future. I looked in their faces and I saw not just criminals, but sons and brothers. Kids who had barely begun their lives before they were written off. And that does something to you. It strips away any distance, any judgment, and any illusion of us and them. Because in that place where time stands still, you begin to see the truth. That no one is just the worst thing they've ever done. That in the darkest corners, humanity flickers. That for some, a real sentence isn't years on paper. It's knowing that they'll never, ever get a chance to rewrite their story again. The turning point came when I stopped fighting. When I stopped fighting the ocean, I began to see the treasures buried underneath the waves. Military gave me a mission. Prison took it away. But my purpose isn't tied to a uniform or a prison sentence. It's tied to something greater. I thought my mistakes defined me and that I had to suffer for them forever. But Christ showed me that grace isn't something you deserve. It's something that you receive. And the moment you accept that, you stop drowning in shame.
Yeah.
Pain wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning, because the moment you make it out of the storm, you have a responsibility to get back on that ship, turn that ship around, and go back and save somebody else. Here's the thing. I know that I'm not the only captain of a sinking ship. We're losing people every day. Look around. How many of us are gripping the wheel so tight that we cannot see the cracks forming under our very own feet? We live in a culture that worships self-reliance, but here's the irony. The more we pretend to have control, the faster we sink. And what about the people we write off? The addicts, the homeless, the incarcerated, the veterans. Oh, we love a redemption story. We love a redemption story. But we're too quick to judge the ones that haven't made it to their happy ending yet. Let me tell you something. The people we label broken are often the ones with the greatest strength, because they have been through battles, through storms that none of us could ever imagine. But here's what I've learned about sinking. It forces you to decide, drown or learn to swim. I learned to swim, but I didn't do it alone. During a routine visit, something changed. I finally had a name for my struggles. Severe combat PTSD. The diagnosis wasn't a prison sentence. It was a lifeline. The VA didn't just help me survive, they helped me rebuild. With their support, I clawed back step by step, day by day, and against all odds, I earned not one, not two, but 3 college degrees. Education became my weapon, knowledge became my shield. Today I don't speak from experience, I speak from expertise. I am a subject matter expert in the human experience. I mean, I've lived it, I've studied it, I've died to it, and I know it in ways very few people ever will. Here's the thing about going down with your ship. You don't realize you're sinking until you're already underwater. I was counting how many people in here have been on my podcast. I counted 12, 13. Please stand up if you've been on one of my podcasts, if you don't mind. That's a lot of people. Wendy's not yet, hasn't been there yet? Okay, great. Thank you very much. When I started podcasting, I actually thought I was throwing out a lifeline to others. But I had it wrong. It wasn't the talking that saved me. It was the listening, 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 who else? Who we got? Where's Laura at? The listening. There she is over there, the listening. It was the listening that saved me. It was the listening. I sat across from guests, veterans, Gus, a couple of other veterans. Sheena just left. She'd be one. Entrepreneurs, survivors, people who fought their own storms. And as they spoke, I realized something so profound, that they weren't just sharing their stories. They were holding up a mirror to mine. Podcast wasn't just about sharing my past. It became about listening, learning, and healing. Because the truth is, our stories aren't meant to be carried alone. We heal in conversation. We heal in connection. We heal when we stop speaking at the world and we start listening to it. These are my final words. For years, I thought strength meant holding on. I thought that survival meant, well, fight harder. I thought I had to do it alone. I was wrong. Sometimes real strength isn't gripping the wheel. It's knowing when to let go. So let me ask you, what storms are you fighting alone? What weight are you carrying that you were never meant to bear? What if the thing you're afraid to release is the very thing that's keeping you from being saved? I was never meant to do this alone. And neither are you. The lifeboat is here. His hand is reaching out. Will you take it? Because I did. And that's why I stand before you today. That's why I stand before you today. All glory goes to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who saved me from the sinking ship.
Yeah.
Thank you. Before I go down, we go down asking questions and stuff. I want to acknowledge two individuals. First, my lovely wife, Courtney Hoover Rush. She would stand up. If you haven't met her, she's the most beautiful individual I've ever met. Like, individual, heart, body, soul, body, soul, body, heart, soul. No, whatever order you want to put that in. And then there's another individual here. This individual, God gives you these little mini miracles when you get out of prison and you go to a halfway house. You transition into a halfway house. Most people who are incarcerated will transition to a halfway house at some point. And there was a young man. There was a young man that And I transitioned to Waco. I kept saying, go north, transition to Waco. Don't go south, back to your own stomping grounds. Change people, places, and things and ideas, right? That's the game. Change people, things. So I go north. I didn't know anything about biblically about north, but I just heard that still voice say, go north. So I went north, and I transitioned to Waco. So when I got out of prison, ironically, I had worked with somebody, and they had just opened a call center in Waco, and I became a supervisor at that call center. And there was a young man that was working underneath me, and that young man used to see me walking to and from work. I didn't have a car, didn't have nothing, just walk to and from. And they said, man, would you need a ride, man? And I don't know if we don't know, but I would probably ask him to drop me off at the corner of some other street so he wouldn't know that he was dropping me off at a halfway house, kind of thing. But my friend, Carlo Banda, is here. He was a 19-year-old young man. I was 10 years older than him. And I was just trying to work my way back into, just kind of get myself back on my feet underneath me. And it just taught me something, that these little nuggets that God leaves you. This one gentleman, this one young man, a 19-year-old kid, says, hey, I want to help you out, man. Do you want to ride somewhere? And Carlo helped me out, and he's seen me through this whole experience. He's seen me, he's seen me through all of it. And I want to give him a round of applause, if you don't mind, because it's, those little lifts like that really matter. And I want to say this to everyone that I've had the pleasure of listening. I never shared my story with you because I needed to muster up the strength to just build this resilience, and and that mental, emotional, and spiritual resilience. As I listened to every one of you, Jay, Laura met me for coffee. She heard my story at a coffee shop. She said, hey, let's sit down with me. She opened her door. So Monica Johnson, Christella, all these amazing individuals that I had the pleasure. I've learned how to leverage my podcasting as a tool for healing. And it's been a rewarding experience for me, to say the least. And I'm still a work in progress, and I'm still excited about the growth experience. This has been a tremendous blessing for my life. What you're watching right now is a manifestation of Christ developed me into the person I am today, and I feel very fortunate. I feel like I was telling somebody, I was like, it's like we have the DC comic superheroes in this room right now, right? Lisa K. You paint this point to somebody, Gus, Chuck, freaking Monica. It's like all these people are just so amazing, strong. Michael is, he's one of the head guys over at Prison Entrepreneurship Program, which I'm an executive volunteer at now. I had one of my opportunities to speak in front of inmates 2 months ago, and there was a groundbreaking. I remember sitting across from Pastor Richard Brunson, who was incarcerated, and as he spoke about being incarcerated, I just like, okay, and I didn't ever say anything to him, but I was just listening to his message, and it was giving me the ammo and the strength to stand before you today. So I want to thank y'all very much for your support, Ronnie, and thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Do y'all have any questions that you'd like to ask Rush?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes, sir.
So you spent 30 days in the hole, right?
Yes.
Nothing but darkness. So when you spend that much time, and we've talked about this.
Yeah.
We was on the show.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It becomes interesting because sometimes you don't have to be in a physical place to be in a dark place. You could be in your own room and be in a dark place. But what was it that, as you sat in that dark place, you had to think about, you had to project in the future in order to give you the strength to get through another dark day?
Yeah.
I think that's the magic right there.
Yeah. Well, ironically, after this piece, there's a thing called "Tomb to the Light," a song that I wrote, and it talks about his name was Father Bill Quigley. Before the way I got in solitary confinement is I had just gotten sentenced, and there's this little guy like walking with his little coffee, all happy, like my coffee, and I had just been sentenced, and I was pissed, I was mad, right? And I was going to my pod, and he was just walking around minding his own business, and he like bumped me, and I just like went off, and I just lost my crap. But there was a pastor, his name's Father Bill Quigley, and it was 30 days before Easter. And what he did was, he said, Rush, you're going to go into this cell, you're going to go into this solitary confinement, and this is going to be your tomb. And on that tomb, you're going to write down people that wronged you, people you wronged. You're going to write down your shame, burden, guilt. And he said, when that door opens, it's going to be like the tomb, the tomb opening up, and you're going to leave it all behind. And I would say, to answer your question, it was that person interceding in my life and planting that dynamic seed. Because all I had was a small pencil, this small, a Bible, and some writing pad I was allowed. And man, I just like somehow that Bible started speaking to me. Open up Acts, open up this, open up Proverbs, every section of the New Testament, and that just started motivating. And that was the first seed that I saw that Christ was in that space with me, and that's what got me through.
Great question.
Yes.
So Rush, how do you stay in this state of mind, right? Because it seems like for a lot of people they struggle to slip backwards, right? And you get that moment, but what's helping you in this time now to be able to stay strong and receive the support that you're getting toward?
Well, that's a great question, because it does come down to like accepting the gifts that God presents you, right? Like I finished my first degree and I was a train wreck. I was miserable. I was angry, mad at myself. Like, why did it take all this crap for me to accomplish this degree? Why did I have to go through so much turmoil? Why did I go to prison? Why did I have to do all, and I didn't really truly enjoy it. But the victories he lays in front of you are right in front of your face if you redirect how we think about things, And I would say that the victories I had, not one, but I was like, is this real? Like, am I going to get a master's degree? Like, what's next? I'm going to get what? I've got a master's degree? I'm the only kid in my family that has a college education, And so for me, I say, it's like, appreciate the gifts that are in front of you, like revisit them. But the other most important part is establish. I remember taking out a piece of paper and put, who do I want to be? And then I was like, kind, loving, smart, intelligent. And I would just write down these characteristics. So when you're in that space where you're struggling, it may be a redefining moment where you're like a profound change is getting ready to take place in your life. And that means shedding some old ideas that we may have. So hope that answered your question. Yes?
If you could go back in time and talk to your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give him?
This is not going to be a popular opinion, but it's going to be an opinion that I think is valid. I don't think I was meant. I grew up in chaos and fortune, conflict, and chaos. So it wasn't a peaceful time for me to be making the kind of moves I was making, enlisting in the military. Because you go into chaos and you get more chaos. Well, what happens, right? Well, it was a recipe for disaster. But I would say that, and I would say, a few years down the road, I would say that probation officer that you were at the courthouse with, that was screaming on top of her lungs and using all this vulgarity, saying, "What the F are you doing with your life? You're ruining it. You're ruining it." She's screaming at me, and it was my second DUI, and she's like screaming at me, "What are you doing? Oh my God, please stop. You're so smart. You're so handsome. I don't understand what's going on." And if I would have just said, "Can you help me?" Instead of taking that stubbornness, fortune stubbornness, and taking it a different way. So definitely. Yes, sir.
To have the courage to stand before us and bare your soul takes an awful lot. And now that you found your courage, and you found your voice, and more importantly, you know how to articulate your story, what's next?
I just had Daryl Utt on my podcast, and he's a Green Beret. Guy's like insanely special ops guy, all of the above, right? And he after the podcast, he's like, he's like, we were talking. I was sharing my story, like I'm telling you now, and he's like, "Rush, like, man, you need to write a book. You got to get out there and write a book." When a Green Beret, who has an amazing story himself, has a book out, he just was Grit to Glory, by the way. You want to read it, but I think that's where God's leading me too. And I will say, when I started preparing, like I started thinking about every one of us, Jay, David, Michael, the individuals that get out in the front the first time. I was visualizing what was it like for them, you know, like this was their moment where they were breaking down some walls in their life to come out, you know, and face their, you know, and be open it up and releasing the burden. David, you know, every one of y'all, I looked at and said, dude, like, you know, I wonder what it's like for John Wayne Walding to come out and start being a leader, be leading in the front. So I took that and said, okay, man, this is the same thing. You're just going to go in there and knock it out. So, yeah, likely a book. I'm speaking engagements, I hope.
That's good. Rush, how can we be praying for you?
I would say continued to put me as many people in front of podcasting. I enjoy it. It's very, I took an approach, an introspective approach to my rehabilitation. It was like, get yourself in front of people so that you can find individual and collective values that'll help you live better. And so I would say, if you got people that you think I would be interested on my podcast, that I think I can grow and learn, and you know, like I said, heal, grow, and learn. I'm down. Let's go. You know, I want to fill my slots up tremendously. So that's for sure. I want to be an active listener, but I also, in that process, want to give everybody a platform to share what's important to them in their lives.
Lisa Kay has something to say.
You've kind of grown up with us too, and we thank you very much for being a big part of it and helping us grow too.
Could I have all of our FPL members up here, please?
Rush, on behalf of Sure, Taylor. I'm a crybaby, everybody. Will you read that, Taylor?
All right. It reads, "The man in the arena. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marked by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasm, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worldly cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. So that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." By Theodore Roosevelt. And this is inscribed for our friend Eric Rush.
Thank you, Eric.
Awesome. What's in it? Is there something in there? Is there something in there? Should I
Open it up.
Open it up? Okay, here we go. It says, you know, I was listening to this arena thing. I was like, okay, I checked that, Mark. I checked that. I mean, humbly, you know, I say it, but I do. What's this? What we got here?
Jill, we may need your help up there.
What is,
So it's engraved with your initials.
okay.
This is a
A mug? Oh, awesome.
This is your burner.
Oh, nice.
So you can heat it up.
Very cool.
Am
Coffee.
I right, Jill? So this is like the
So this is it's a temper charged mug, so it's
Wow.
the point of it is to kind of keep you fueled up and charged up throughout your day.
Okay.
Just because obviously you do a lot of stuff. Your
Yeah.
podcast is a big deal.
Yeah.
So we also turn the charger part into your motto, which is turn purpose into power.
Oh, wow. That's freaking awesome. That is sick.
And so
That's
it's got his
awesome.
initials, and so it'll keep it charged for like 6 hours. So if you're just running through the day, you need your hot coffee, you need whatever, it's there for you. And then we've got some kind of earphones
plug?
for you, similar
Awesome.
to the AirPods, the Apple AirPods.
There's your battery.
It has his initials on the case for the charging
That's so
case.
cool.
And then this is a QR code we made personally for you. It's a morning vibes playlist, just to get you kick-started right for your day.
Thank you so much. That's amazing. Thank you. You know,
This is Jill with 30.
just branching out with this a little bit. you know, for a long time, my counselor had been saying, Rush, you need to go into these veterans groups and sit down and listen to stories. But they didn't understand that I was being treated for a symptom, not the root cause. I was treated for alcoholism, you know. So I never, substance use, right? And so I was spending all my time listening to stories of, you know, the grandiosity of this and that in AA meetings. So I was burned out by the time I got out of that. But when that when the VA interceded, it was a game changer because they just stopped, they weren't treating the root cause anymore. I mean, they were treating the root cause, not the symptom. And once that happened, in 2013, everything was, you know, earned those multiple degrees during that time, and that was a game changer for me. But where I'm going with that is that the counselor kept saying, you need to go sit down with other veterans and listen to their stories. And I was like, man, I'm tired of listening to people's stories. You know, I need to get out there and I want to see it. I want to be a part of it. And somehow God manifested our relationship with James Trombley. He introduced me to Lisa Kay, and I started working with them on the Veterans Appreciation event. And it was kind of like, I'm gonna work from the backside and just kind of do this and I actually fought not going to any of this stuff, but then I met with Lisa Kay and we started developing the Fellowship Veterans Appreciation event from the ground up, and it's been a beautiful experience to walk with these ladies. You know, what they do help in my rehabilitation in a different way. You know, instead of sitting down with, you know, I leveraged the media stuff, and I said I'm going to keep showing up.
I drowned in silence, no light, no air. Prison walls became my deepest despair. Alone with the echoes of what I'd done, and in that void I came undone.